that, they don't start defending better. And, we've got to at least get it down to a 1.1 point per possession. If we shoot threes, well, no, it's not best NATO's relative to what we're trying to accomplish here. All right, that's the end of it. I can't do the more yet. I'll work on it though. Okay, what do we got?
Rece, you've obviously been here a lot with GameDay for football over the course of your career. What does it say about the program that Oates has built as far as this being the first time you guys have been here with basketball?
The level of national recognition that even as good as Alabama basketball has been in the past, it's been better than a lot of people realize, I think, on the outside. But it has a level of national recognition now with the #1 overall seed last year, with attempting to win the conference for the third time in 4 years, winning the tournament both of those years too to back it up. I think there's just a sustained level of excellence that brings with it the validation of getting attention of our show. And I don't mean that to sound like patting ourselves on the back with the show, but I do think that when you have the brand of GameDay attached to it, and you consider that the staple places that we visited, Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, and Duke, obviously, to be now included in that mix is pretty good. So I think it really speaks volumes for what Nate and his entire staff have been able to do in terms of creating consistency and also creating a level of excellence.
You've been at a lot of big venues, you mentioned a couple of them there. When Coleman gets full and it gets rocking, it can create a big atmosphere, but do you think that, you mentioned the basketball getting to national recognition, do you think it's necessary to have a new venue, or do you think it can kind of be what it is with what it has?
Greg Burns is a really good friend of mine. They need a new building. I mean, the first time I came into this building, I was 5 years old, going on 6, and my parents brought me to see Elvis Presley. Actually, they were coming in, probably couldn't get a sitter at that time. And even when I came in then, as a 5-year-old, I was far more mesmerized by the fact that there were scoreboards in the corners, and I was even aware of C.M. Newton's team at that young age, and used to watch the replays of those games on Alabama public television. So I was a little more, even though the king of rock and roll was here. And now Billis will tell you, I win all contests. When people say, what was your first concert? Oh, I don't know, I saw Night Ranger, or, I'm going, Elvis freaking Presley, But I say that to say, this building's old. And what you need, I think, is, something a little more intimate. They've done an amazing job of making this place so much better than it was when I was in school. Way better. I mean, they've done everything you could possibly do to make this place better. But I do think it's appropriate that they, eventually, when finances dictate that it's feasible, and I know they've had some hiccups along those ways, but when feasible, it would be something that would really add to and help the program, for sure.
So you graduated from Alabama in 1988, and you were there during the WIMP era. Can you kind of compare the eras between what you saw while you were in school here relative to what you're seeing now with NATO's?
I think there's a lot of similarity there, because during the time that I was in school here and for a few years after that, that was as good a run of sustained excellence as you would find, absent the one thing that haunted them, not being able to get to the Final Four. And this is early in the building stage, and I really believe that NATO's will get Alabama to a Final Four. But that's the only thing lacking, because everything else during that era when I was in school, they had. The multiple Sweet 16 appearances, the big time stars, the high draft picks, they had it all. And Derek McKee and Enos Watley and Bobby Lee Hurt, Buck Johnson, so many great players. And then a few years after I graduated, the teams with Spree and Ori, that's big time star power. And so I think that what WIMP did is amazing. It showed it could be done here. And I think that what Nate's been able to do in a very short period of time is on track to mirror that. And I think ultimately they'll get to a Final Four, which is the one thing that has eluded this program.
You're from Muscle Shoals.
I am.
From the area. So is Mark Sears. Talk about just the season that he's having for Alabama.
He's just been sensational. I mean, I marvel watching him play because he's not the biggest guy in the world. And he's a really good shooter from the perimeter, but he somehow finds a way to be a great shooter at the rim at 6'1" or whatever he is. He's a very competitive guy. He's added even more to his game this year, and he's sort of the epitome of what college basketball has become. Starting his career at Ohio and establishing a reputation, getting to a certain level, and then testing himself at a higher level. And then he's even taken it another step by elevating his game from last year. He was really good last year, but now he's an All-American, and I think it's really just a tribute to not only his talent but his work ethic, and obviously he's a good leader. He's highly competitive, and I think he's just been a great force and great player for them this year.
Alabama fans have maybe become a little numb to hosting game day for football just because it's happened so much. I would expect there will be a little more enthusiasm tomorrow. So kind of what makes a good crowd or environment for basketball game days?
I think, first of all, numbers. We need some people, especially in a building that's as big as this one is. It would be fantastic if we really, pack some people in here, and hopefully we'll make it fun so that they'll, the goal is always when the fans leave, whether it's football or basketball, to say, man, that was fun, I wanna go back. So we'll be engaged with them throughout, and I think it's really important, for them to come and show their support for their team, why they're proud of their program, make some noise, react to us, boo us when we talk about how good Tennessee is, and they are, and we talk about how good Kentucky and Auburn are, and they are, and they can boo, 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 and that'll be fun. And then when we talk about how great Mark Sears is, they can cheer and go crazy. And Nate's gonna be on the show. We've probably got another special guest that might show up at some point during the program that I think they will react favorably to. So it'll be a fun morning, and I hope everybody comes out and enjoys it and says, I can't wait till those guys come back, even Billis.
What do you think of this matchup, this second time around?
Jay and I were talking about it a little bit before, and it probably comes down to how's the game going to be played, right? If it gets real physical, turns into a defensive game, obviously that's advantage Tennessee. If it's a little more free-flowing up and down, and while Tennessee can really score with Dalton Connect now, something that they really haven't had the last few years, but if it gets up and down and played a little faster and it maybe called a little bit tighter, and that favors Alabama. So I think really style of play is, and how that style is established early and what the tempo is going to be, not only in terms of getting up and down the floor, but just what are the whistles like, and that kind of thing. So I think that'll be the biggest thing about the matchup. They're two really, really good teams. They both have holes. Alabama's is clearly rim protection and defense at times, and Tennessee's is, consistent scoring outside of Connect. But both are really good, and both are, worthy of competing for the SEC championship. Yes.
You've been a fan of Alabama for years. Have you ever seen this coming for Alabama College GameDay to come to cover basketball? And then what's it mean to you to be here covering basketball over football?
It's really fun. And I didn't know if we would get here or not, because the first thing, in order for us to bring the show here, is you have to be good and you have to sustain it a little bit, because not every week, but the overwhelming majority of the weeks, our show is tied to what the prime game is. That's not true in football. That's one of the things that makes basketball different. So it's tied to the game that is getting prime time attention. So you have to be good enough to be in that game first. And Alabama's ability to, as we talked about earlier, sustain some excellence opened the door for that. So I think it's going to be really fun. I mean, it's always great to come back to a place that carries great memories for you and that means a lot to you personally. So it's great to be here. We'll have some fun, and I'm hopeful that we'll give away 19,000 of State Farm's dollars, and that'll be a good morning for everybody. And then the game will be great, I'm sure.
Can you talk about the coaching job that Nate Oates has done this year? Obviously, he lost 3 assistants. He lost Noah Clowney, Charles Bediako, and obviously Brandon Miller. I think for a lot of Alabama fans, the expectation maybe wasn't quite to the level that we're at right now. Can you talk about kind of what Oates has done this year as far as his coaching job?
He's one of the finest coaches in the country, and he's really bright, and he's innovative, and he lets his players, rephrase, he doesn't let his players play with freedom, he insists on it. And I mean, this Davin Cosby now, he's my favorite player all of a sudden. You know why? Because my man went out there and played 13 minutes and got up 10 threes. That's my kind of dude right there, you know, let it fly, kid, I love it. You know, so they play a style that's fun to watch. And he's able to get his players to buy into it. And I think one of the most interesting things about what he's done in this, you know, quest to try to win 3 conference championships in 4 years is that he's pretty much done it with 3 different teams. It's not as if they built toward a stretch, you know, and had a core group that stayed around. You know, the Herb Jones team was very different. They still shot threes, got up and down, wanted to play fast, and stayed within his philosophy and system. But it was very different from the team with Brandon Miller last year, which, you know, was very good defensively. And this team is not as good defensively, but it probably doesn't have, even as well as Mark Sears has played, and as good a player as I think he is. I mean, Brandon Miller might get you 40, you know, like that. And, you know, so they don't have that. They don't really have the rim protection, and yet he's been able to put his team right back at the top of the conference again. And it's really a testament, I think, to the way he plays, the way he gets his players to believe, to play with freedom, to play aggressively. They've done really well bouncing back from what might otherwise have been significantly demoralizing games, which I think is also the mark of a really good coach. I mean, I characterized him earlier this week talking with someone as a rising star, and then corrected myself. I said, you know what? I don't think he's rising anymore. I think he's just a star coach. He's excellent. He's done an excellent job here.
We have time for one more?
Back on the topic of Coach Oates, I think we've all heard whispers here and there about other bigger schools potentially trying to poach him away. What, if anything, do you think it would take for the university, for Greg Byrne, to ensure that Coach Oates stays here long term?
I've, you know, look, I'm not in a position to speak for Greg or the administration at all, but my inclination would be, given the fact that this is the guy that he went out and went after, and the success that they've had, he'll do everything humanly possible to keep him here, you know, for the long term. And, you know, it's the way college athletics are changing right now. There will always be a draw for a coach. I mean, just look across the way at football. Kalen DeBoer had a really, really good job. Really good job. Washington's a really good job. You can win the national championship at Washington, clearly, because they were 1 game away from doing it last year. So there's always going to be the draw, though, of a place where it's everything for certain people. Some people don't want that. DeBoer obviously did. And then there's also the draw of making it everything in your own image. So a lot of that will come down to what Nate wants to do, right? I don't think that he'll leave Alabama because they, you know, at any point because they didn't do something. I don't think. You know, I think they will do everything in their power to make sure that all suitors will have formidable competition to keep it. Because here's one true thing. If you guys remember this from me, your time with me will not have been ill spent. If somebody else doesn't want your coach, sooner or later, you're not gonna want him either. So it's a good thing when people come and try to get your coach, because when they don't, pretty soon you're gonna go, yeah, we don't want him either. And that's clearly not the case with Nate. So it's a good thing. And I imagine Alabama will, especially with the resources that are available to every team virtually in the SEC now, that they'll do everything that they possibly can to keep him. It'll come down to time and opportunity and, you know, what his career goals might be in the next 10 years or whatever. But I would be surprised if he's not here for the foreseeable future. Okay, good.